All right, so I'll make this easy. I'm going to introduce Percy Stalker from TeamViewer. Sorry, too much food at lunch. All right, Percy, take over. Good luck, guys. Enjoy the time.
Perfect. Thanks for making your way over after lunch. I'm sure it wasn't easy to move after the burger, and it's probably the people that only had salad, right? So we're going to have a panel today, and I'm very happy to present to you a super diverse panel that we have today with lots of different companies, super interesting. And we're going to talk about remote assistance and also augmented work instructions. And so you're going to hear from the panelists how they actually already today use this technology in their companies and what obstacles they may have faced introducing new technology. We're going to talk about some success stories as well. We're going to talk a little bit also about what's the next steps and what do you have coming up next in your journey on AR. I'm going to be a host for this session. I'm Percy. I've been in this space for about 10 years. So I've been a co-founder of a company called Ubimax that was acquired by TeamViewer about 2 years ago. And so I've seen a lot of things come and go over the years, both on the software and also on the hardware side. And right now in TeamViewer, I'm responsible as a product manager for our frontline solution suite. So it's super interesting for me to hear all the stories also myself, and then also get engaged with the audience and really talk about how you use technology and how can we actually help and kind of shape up the solutions in that space in a meaningful way. So let me introduce the panel that we have today. So we have Andy Warren. He's a Senior Manager, Engineering Services at Bridgestone. And you can see by the length of his beard that he has quite some stories to tell, very diverse applications that he has deployed. So we're looking forward to hear from him on what he has been doing. Then we have Doug House from Porsche. And Doug has a wealth of experience, may I say that? 39 years in the technical service industry, really, with Porsche, and then 24 years, I believe, directly with Porsche. And doesn't not only have the technical experience, but he is also one of the early adopters of this technology, having been first exposed to this technology in 2016 in Atlanta at this very conference, and kind of taking it to North America, Porsche, since then. Then we have James Cooper. And James Cooper is Chief Technologist for Advanced Visualization Capabilities and Strategy and Vision across Raytheon Intelligence and Space. That's probably the longest title that I've ever seen. So he's super into innovation. So he was in innovation before. He was leading innovation groups, and now he's really looking into the AR space and to make a meaning for that at Raytheon. So super interesting to hear from him, also more on the visionary side. And then we have Jorge Hernandez, and he's Quality Assurance VP at Wendy's. So isn't that cool? I mean, it's such a diverse set of companies that we have here. And so I think the food industry isn't necessarily the first industry that you think about when you think about AR. But at the same time, when we go to a Wendy's restaurant, we expect that specific taste and we expect the food quality and so on. So it is super cool that augmented reality also can make a difference when we talk about the food space. So looking forward to hear from you, Jorge, about that as well. And then last but not least, we have Wesley Bausch, and he is Innovation and Technology Project Manager at the Southern Company. And so it's when we talk about things that are so critical to our infrastructure, like power plants, especially nuclear power plants, it's cool to hear that augmented reality also makes a kind of a big difference in that space to make our world a little bit safer. So I'm super excited to hear about the stories that the panel is going to tell today, because I think we're going to get very different perspectives, and then there's probably going to be some things that are going to be some common narratives that we're going to hear as well. So looking forward to hear that. We have a set of questions so that everybody can share a little bit about their story and so on. And then towards the end, we're going to open it up to the audience, depending a little bit on how we are on timing, so that you can also ask them questions to the panel. And then in case we should run out of time, you will find us outside the door, and we can engage in some discussions afterwards. And I'll also be at the TeamViewer booth, obviously, if you have questions for me. So let's start out with a discussion really here. And the first question goes over to you, James, about your AR journey at Raytheon. It would be great if you can share a little bit where you've come from and what you've already done in this space.
Yeah, sure. So since about, I believe, 2014, we've been really engaging, exploring the XR space, AR, VR, other kinds of advanced visualization capabilities, looking at, I believe, starting really with supporting the remote worker. You have a lot of field technicians out there, customer sites, and of course, within aerospace and defense, we have specific constraints around, you have to have secure communications, make sure that things don't use public commercial servers. They're definitely not on the commercial cloud, things like that. So we're really looking at how do we support these workers in a way that was more meaningful and impactful and helpful than just a phone call. Because of course we especially didn't have Zoom or Teams or anything like that at the time. But moving forward, moving more and more into different kind of capabilities, specialized facilities, other kind of technologies, expand the use cases into design reviews, and then of course like the topic here, remote support, augmented work instructions, and really just trying to look more and more at what all the use cases are out there, where the real value is going to be, and trying to match together internal and external solutions together. It's been a pretty long journey in our space, but it's been a really good one, a slow but steady one, I would say.
Oh, that's cool to hear. And maybe now if we could hear from Jorge as well about kind of your journey, which may be similar or different, right? Because it's a very different space, defense industry versus food industry. So would love to hear your thoughts as well and where you came from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Vice President of Quality Assurance for the Wendy's company. My responsibilities are to ensure the safety, quality, and regulatory compliance of all products from farm to fork. That means the growers of the product, processors of the product, packers, distribution lanes, distribution companies, the distribution trucks, and then anything to the restaurant all the way to the customer. Setting up the standards, setting up the compliance, it requires me to be able to have oversight at different levels over all the products that come into our 7,200 restaurants in 32 countries. So obviously, this is a huge task, and we're always looking for tools that allows us to do our job a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more effectively. And this is how we came to look for this kind of product. We were looking for something that allows us to be better, faster, and places where we need to be. We came into this product not kind of like by chance. We were looking for additional tools, and before the pandemic, I think I was telling you about that when we talked first. We discovered that this was starting to be piloted. So I wanted to pilot in my area to see what were the possibilities to be able to use it within my area. Now, understanding that it's not just restaurants, it's all the way through the supply chain, right? It's not the same to be in the field of lettuce in the middle of California or in the middle of Canada than to be in the restaurant, down the street from here. So all of those things, I wanted to test it. Now, we developed a pilot program at first to be able to do that and learn what were the capabilities and what were the uses, and then write the rules for my team to be able to know when to use them and how to use them so that we can maximize value across the chain. So that's basically my story, how we came across, and and we have been successful. And like you said, we had some lessons, and we have some successes. I'm happy to talk about it.
All right. I think we all have a lot of lessons in that in that room. And sometimes we learn more from the use case, as you said, like where it's not applicable, and than for the places where we do see great success. Then if you see success in the long run, it's always easy, right? But right. So maybe as we talk about some of the use cases, let's also talk a little bit about how new technology is really introduced and. Wesley, we talked about that already in our prep calls, and it would be interesting to hear your thoughts about how do you introduce new technology and how do you do it at your company, and what have you already done?
Yeah, I think that always can be a challenge. From a project manager standpoint, you talk a lot about all the tools that you use to do it, and a stakeholder register is one of those, right? But that's a simple phrase to say, okay, well, this is kind of the wide group of people that will either impact the project or will have an impact on the outcome of it. But in the end, I look at it, as we said, with a new technology like this, it's all about getting that energy behind it. So that to me usually falls to the end users to reach out to the people at our sites and get the people that are going to be physically using this product and get them to help build those use cases. And as you mentioned, help us develop what a pilot will look like and one that'll be effective in kind of delivering the message of what this technology will bring to our organization. But that alone isn't enough, especially for us. I work at the corporate organization for Southern Nuclear. We're a subsidiary of Southern Company. So for us, I'm looking at products just that fit into the nuclear realm for our soon-to-be 8 operating units. And we don't have an R&D budget. We have an R&D program, but they're at Southern Company, the mothership, as I call it. For us, it's all about going to that end user, going to that group and finding that sponsor. So I think the other part that's been really important on our journey of introducing new products is to get those sponsors, those managers, the VPs also just as engaged as we do the end users from the very beginning. They're going to be the ones that look for the money, and sometimes, innovation against fix the plant, things that break and will keep us running and keep us putting power to the grid. It always doesn't balance out where you would hope so from an innovation perspective. So getting those people involved at the very beginning, having their input and having both ends of it, the people using the product and the people that are really going to be the sponsor behind it, having them be part of building the business case, developing the scope, really developing what it would look like to implement a new technology like this across our fleet.
And I think that's a very fair point. I mean, when you introduce new technology, you do need to take everybody on board. And that's typically the end users. You're not going to convince people to use something that's not ergonomic. And you're not going to convince management to do anything that doesn't make any commercial sense. And then there's some special parties also typically. I mean, I'm originally from Germany, so workers' councils and so on, they also want to be included as well. And it's important because, I mean, they represent the people at the company. And so it makes sense to embrace it and really formulate a strategy that has all of them in there.
Yeah, there's a little bit even from the sides. There might be top down and bottom up, but as you mentioned, I mean, we have to worry about the cybersecurity aspect of it. So they're coming in from the sides, and then the IT personnel, the people that are really going to support these type of devices when they're out in the field.
That is so true. and do that early on, especially for the security pieces. There's a bunch of checks that typically need to be done. And sometimes you can prepare as a vendor for it if you have some pre-canned penetration tests and stuff like that. Of course, when you do that, then that's good. But some things are just code reviews that just take time to do them. And so what's always good to hear a little bit about kind of the user stories as well, and kind of the impact that new technology has. So when I was talking to Doug up front and we were talking about the impact, he had some great stories to tell about how when he introduced it at Porsche, how our users are already benefiting from it. If you can share some examples, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I listened to James and Wesley and Jorge, and we kind of went through all of that, and now we're at the stage where we have a lot of examples of how we have used both the remote support and the augmented work instructions very successfully. You think of, there's simple cases that we can talk about when you have a simple case of rear seat entertainment centers, rear seat entertainment systems within our four-door vehicles. And when those systems are in there, you have oftentimes young users in the back seats, and so things happen and the system gets locked up. And that sounds like a really simple solution, right? Just put the password in and go. But it's not that easy because there's security around that. There's also the fact that you can't do it when the vehicle's moving, and there's all of these different securities around it. So it becomes very difficult. And believe it or not, to do a simple reset of that is 12 steps. And when a technician gets that and the customer's waiting and that information's not there in the owner's manual, it's not readily available in the workshop manual because the system is new or whatever the case may be, then you go to the remote support and the augmented work instructions, and you have the You can have the user of the glasses be in the back seat. You can have the remote support specialist sitting in Atlanta, so the car can be wherever. It could be here in San Diego. This one wasn't, but it could be. And he's in Atlanta, and he puts that guy in the back seat. And then, so not only is he supporting him remote-wise, but then with the augmented work instructions, then what he does is he can send the document, which is a secure document, into the glasses, and he can begin to work with the technician to unlock that. And what would normally be a multiple day process because of the back and forth through a ticketing system and phone calls, maybe some exchanges of pictures, becomes just about 3 minutes. So the car ends up being fixed, repaired, before the service advisor can finish writing the repair order on the service drive. This is the power that we found in the remote support and the augmented work instructions. That's just one example. Understand, we've been doing this now. We started a pilot phase in 2017. We have many examples like this now where it has worked. So to James's point, and to Wesley's point, and to Jorge's point, getting through that process, that's important. You can't get there without what they talked about. But we're at that point where we see now the real benefits, the really, and I think Jorge could talk to this too. We see the real benefits and the real cost savings. And I always bring it back to this. At the end of this, there's a customer involved, and that's who's benefiting from this incredible technology.
Yeah, I think it's one of these win-win-win situations where really the customer wins, the company,
Yes.
the dealership wins, Porsche wins. So it's kind of a big, just big win for everybody if you take out friction out of the process. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing by deploying technology like that. And what is interesting to hear is, as you've been doing that for quite some years already, is it sounds like also in your company, like in many others, it has become a standard tool to use. And
we saw, we were using it before COVID, and we saw adoption of it, and it was not bad. We would have liked to seen it a little bit better, but it was pretty good, and the technology was new, and so we're asking the technicians to adopt to the new technology and all of that goes with that. I won't get into that for the sake of time, but then COVID hit, and we saw our use. You're going to talk to this more, I think. We saw our use triple instantly when COVID hit.
No, absolutely. And I think everybody, all the companies that already embraced the technology before, they were prepared because the infrastructure was already there, and you could immediately kind of scale up. But I want to kind of bring it back to Andy here for a second about the standardization versus innovation topic. It's you start out with innovation, it becomes standardization at some point, but it's a field of tension, and we talked about that. So it would be great to hear from you what your thoughts are on how to manage that tension and introduce it in your company.
Yeah, so I think everybody here is here to see what is the new cool, latest and greatest, and we want to try it all. We're like 3-year-olds. We all want to touch and see the latest and greatest thing. And the exhibit hall is a great example of all these cool things. But, having, a plant in Brazil, a plant in Canada, and a plant in North Carolina all doing 3 different things is a nightmare to support. And so we worked very hard to kind of find the best tool for certain tasks and standardize that we're making sure that we're not rolling out something different that's unsupportable as we scale up. Like you guys, we had started sending lenses out before COVID. COVID hit. I actually had about a dozen of them in the office a couple weeks before we locked down, and I sent all those out to all the plants that didn't have one, so we could be ready for that. And then design review and things like that become standard. But the training app is where we're really struggling to standardize and fighting that. We want people to forge ahead and blaze new trails, but we want them to do it on our trail, not on their own. So that's something we've worked really hard on. Showing our success has helped with that, but then also, providing that support. Our number one issue isn't buying the software or the hardware. Our cost holdback is really having that SME time where we have those experts that we need to help us build the experience or work out the workflow. and being able to get that guy's time for 3 months, they give me $10 million before they give me somebody's time for 3 months right now. And so that's always a struggle. If we standardize, we can scale it much faster than if we're all doing something different at 100 different locations.
Yeah, I think that is always kind of the central versus decentral challenge. But you hit on something as well, which is also the content challenge, right? It's how do you create content, or how do you make content that is already existing available in systems? So it's I've seen that kind of there's a need for both. I mean, to have standard tools to create content from scratch where there's none. But then also when you've proven it out, oftentimes companies already have content. You need to make that available via interfaces and do that. So that is a super crucial point that you made there. Maybe as we talk about kind of challenges in introducing new technology, James, I can imagine at Raytheon there may be some specific challenges. You already alluded in your intro a little bit to that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I mean, it should make perfect sense that aerospace and defense is a very regulated industry. A lot of controls around it. There is cybersecurity, but there's a lot of other controls around everything that we do. The products that we send out, they have to work right. They have to work right the first time because, lives are literally on the line. So there's a lot of expectation about these products and services that are out there. There's a lot of things that we're seeing right now that are on the commercial cloud, Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure or whatnot, that are out there that we think, okay, that's interesting, that's exciting, that's something that we might like to leverage. We'd like to at least test it out, but we're not able to, and we're still relegated to a lot of on-prem solutions, or we're trying to push people towards FedRAMP certification in the Gov cloud, and a lot of vendors are still like, what is that? I've never heard of this. Is that related to what I've got? So there are a lot of challenges that are very unique to our industry, or at least or unique to certain specific industries, that make us take longer to evaluate and adopt solutions. And so we really like to be able to partner up with all of you more to be able to figure out, what are the solutions? What are the right pathways to get there? How can we streamline this process? How can we make more of these solutions things that we can actually realistically evaluate and consider and then deploy?
Yeah, I think you have some very specific challenges there, but you're not alone, because there's other industries that have similar challenges, I would say. And there's also what we see, interesting wise, also countries have interesting challenges in that regards as well. If you're doing business in a company in a country like India or also China, not so popular these days, but then you also they have requirements about data residency. Where do you store things? So you need to have good answers for that, on how you do that. Having talked a little bit about kind of how to the use cases and how to introduce it, let's also talk a little bit about success. How do we measure success? And I believe, Andy, you have some thoughts on that one as well. How to measure success for the deployments?
Yeah, and, I was kind of talking earlier. Those SMEs' time is very, very important to us. When you start talking about success, sometimes you're talking about dollars, your scrap waste, increased production, things like that. But you're also talking about training. I know a lot of people in here probably dealing with the great retirement and resignation type situation. That tribal knowledge. So how much knowledge are you capturing? How much training are you capturing? That's as much about a successful ROI is how many dollars did you save, or how many more dollars did you make for the company? And I think that's key, is really finding out how to communicate that back. What are your needs, and how do we solve those needs internally to where management wants to give you either the resources of the dollars or whatever, so you can scale this up. Because this technology, my biggest problem is a lot of times the ROIs are unbelievable. They're sub 1 day sometimes. If we really put it on paper, nobody's going to believe that. There's no way that they can take less than 5 years to pay back. They'll take less than 5 days sometimes, if you could really scale it out across everybody. So that's one of those things that you really have to get that defined out and make sure that you're communicating well with management on how that ROI is paying back, not just in dollars, but also in knowledge or training or development or whatever that may be.
I think that is super important, and it's not only kind of sometimes the quantifiable things, but it's really also about the stories that we tell and make it tangible for the people and to understand it. Would be super curious for you, Jorge. Is it similar for you or is it different?
Absolutely, and this is one of the things that allows us to go from actually the piloting to start implementing. Now we are doing that, and at a different pace. But one of the things I found out, for example, one of the biggest uses that we all had, and you guys mentioned, and Doug, said, where you can be at a place from a distance, see what you see, kind of thing, which was huge for us, especially during the COVID, where you could not travel to other places because there were restrictions. You were not allowed to go there, and there were all kinds of things. Had to there wait 2 weeks before you can even go do an assessment. Well, at the same time, if you remember in those times, a lot of industries in the food industry had big problems, because they had outbreaks. So they closed down plants, they closed down a lot of the things, and we needed product to be able to go to a restaurant. So we needed to approve in a very fast pace new suppliers of all kinds of ingredients and stuff like that. So we were a little bit in a bind. We used them very well during that time. It allows us to be able to be there and being able to provide the oversight needed to ensure that the products we were buying still were safe, that they had the quality that we needed, and they had the regulatory compliance that we expect. So that was something that we were able to do. But one of the things that right away, became very apparent to me is that we were getting some very strong business indicators in 3 parts. First of all, sending somebody from Columbus, Ohio to, Arkansas to look at a chicken plant, there is a custom, the hotel, the time he goes there, the cost to be able to go there. Second of all, there is what I call dead time. That person has to drive there and be able to do that where he or she cannot work with it. So those are hours, right? And then it gets to the plant and it actually can work. So there is a cost of there, and then there is a cost of time. And then the third one, is that available time, where else can I put it? Because we had an availability to do that. So I was able to measure all those 3 ways and be able to present it to my leadership and say, look, just with this part of the pilot, we can save all these kinds of money. Because he or she doesn't have to go there, right? So there is the travel, which everybody's the easiest one. But this amount of time on the average that it takes them to get there, which most of them can't work, right? And you multiply that by the amount of, the rate of their salary, that can be very significant. Now I can apply that time on resources towards things that they can do while I'll be over here. And that obviously became very, very, very good. Right. So that was an important part. That's why we went, from pilot to start implementing. But that's just an example of the things we were able to uncover. You start thinking about how this is helping me to be more efficient and a lot more effective in our work. The only thing that allows us to do is because we have a program where we have a pre-approval process. With the use of this technology, allows us to focus on the areas that were more critical for us. Sometimes you didn't have the ability to do the whole facility. Now, when you're there, you just got to do it because you're already there. But when you don't, and you just need to see these 3 or 4 critical control points to ensure that you have the safety of the product, you can do it a lot faster. And something that your suppliers really appreciate because you're focused on the things that are most important to the product itself. So those are the kinds of things that it allows us, to really move forward this tool. And it is a tool that it has its use in certain areas and in certain parts, right? And if I can comment before I take too much time into some of the things that we have, we also covered it cannot be used in every situation or with every industry. We run into the problem that some people would not let us record into their establishments because there is either practices, equipment, or things that are considered secret, trade secrets to their particular industry that they were not able to be able to record. So to be able to work around that was something that we knew now, be able to do that. So we do a questionnaire. Can you do this? Can you do this? And then I can use this tool. If any of this becomes a problem, then we have to go there, right? So allows us to navigate to that, uncover those things, and be able to navigate became a very, very important thing for our business.
And Jorge touched on too, the people aspect of it. A lot of people quit traveling during COVID. My group, my parent department, whatever you want to call it, was like 90% travel prior to COVID. They got used to not being home. They didn't want to travel anymore. So we were able to, get retention and basically, the employee satisfaction of not having to travel by using remote assistance is unmeasurable. So that's another thing that can go into your ROI is how much You know, how many marriages did you save because you didn't have somebody on the road full time? You know?
You joke about it, but when I first take over my department, that was one of the biggest complaints. There were a lot of people who were ready to quit because they were traveling 80% of the time. Once we started to implement this technology, those numbers went down, and there is hardly anybody. You're absolutely right. You know, that's another business benefit.
To Andy's point, though, that's a really good point, and it shouldn't be dismissed too quickly, because
Yes.
we saw the same thing Andy saw, is that some people were reluctant to get back to traveling, and I had a little resistance to that from management. But here was the thing: you could end up with this technology, you could end up having that same person actually in 4 or 5 different stores on the same day that he couldn't have gotten in
true.
a week. And so it's a big difference, and that again comes to how you present it and how you talk about it to management. And what do you look when you start talking about the ROI? It gets to be a big conversation. But Jorge, I think you can relate. We only have 197 dealers, but if I can have a guy be in 4 of them in one day, that's like a whole week.
Yes.
And Wesley, maybe I can shoot one over to you as well. Sometimes it's also about human lives, right?
Yeah, I think we've already started to talk a little bit about the return on investment. Well, there's a lot that can go into that with this. I mean, for us, we started with just industrial safety. When we first looked at, wearables and augmented remote support, we actually started even more basic than that. We have a lot of people, engineers that are out there doing field work in confined spaces. It's an industrial setting, it's a power plant. So, how can we get something out of their hands and onto their head and be able to capture photos, capture video, and capture data that we can bring back and analyze, in the office setting. So that's kind of where it started. But for us too, this is unique to us and probably doesn't mean a lot, but just thinking about outside the basic ROI is, for us, it's nuclear safety. Our employees are in half the plant, and for our pressurized water reactors, you're on that side of the plant, you're on the hot side of the plant. And to reduce the amount of people that are there for a particular job, if you can throw on some remote support device and allow one person to go in there and have their subject matter expert, instead of them over their shoulder, virtual through a device, that's a huge benefit for us, huge return on investment to reduce dose to our employees. So that's another thing we talked a lot about. And really, in the end, I mean, for us, it's just about building a use case for reducing O&M too, as these guys have kind of already hit on a lot. Corporate doesn't exist outside of supporting our nuclear facilities. So if we can find better ways to be at all 4 sites at one time, that's what we're trying to look for. And for augmented work instructions, I mean, you hit on the importance of regulation. Well, nuclear is very highly regulated too. So being able to standardize things, not only in the form of work instructions, but training too, looking at it from a virtual reality, it'd be great to have one training module that is used and standardized across the fleet, rather than 4 different instructors teaching a module differently from one another. So I think that's kind of where we're headed right now, is taking the work instructions, being able to live and breathe by those. I mean, that's what we are. We live and die, not much dying, but live by those procedures. And if you can find a way to make sure that they're doing things exactly per the procedure and create that more immersive environment for the workers that are in the field, that's where we're going. And then, like I said, with the augmented work instructions, past that, I mean, I should say, is the training aspect. And I think we talked a little bit about that before, not just the standardization of the training, but that gap, just knowledge transfer and retention, being able to capture things so that people down the line will be able to use that to kind of take over that position with the gaps we have in knowledge.
And I think in these cases, when you can prevent radiation, I think you don't have an adoption problem. I assume in these cases, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Okay, I'll take the glass.
That's right.
But sometimes we do face trouble with adoption. And Doug, I think over the years you've also developed some strategies on how to increase adoption. I mean, we cannot trigger COVID every 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Which tripled the use, right? But maybe you have some other advice for us.
Well, I get asked this question a lot, and I have to go back to the beginning and use myself as an example. one of the things I tell people when I'm asked about this question, and interestingly enough, I'm asked this question quite a bit. The first thing I say is, don't make assumptions. I made a lot of assumptions going into this, and I'll tell you about one of the first ones that turned out to be totally wrong. Because having been in the industry for a long time, I thought I could kind of predict how the end user, in our case, the technicians working on our vehicles, I kind of thought I could guess how they would adopt to this. So my assumption was, the young guys are going to pick this up, they're going to run with it really quick. The older guys, more my age, they're going to struggle. They're going to have resistance to this. And I had it completely backwards. And I'm still a little bit surprised by that, but I had it completely backwards. We run into some resistance from the younger guys. The older guys, more my age, have really adopted and really taken to it. And so that's my first thing, is don't make any assumptions. And I think the second thing, and I heard this on a panel earlier today, run a pilot, run a small pilot. I think Jorge's going to shake his head on this. Run a pilot, run a small pilot, and get success stories from that pilot. Get those success stories that you can talk about, that you can show the end users, that you can show management, that you can show everybody involved what the success was from those pilots. And they don't have to be big. We have 197 dealers. We started with 3. And we grew that 3 to 9, and we grew the 9 to 18 in a pilot phase. But we took those early successes and we could show what we did and what we learned. And learning things like having the remote expert be able to just in a glance, as the technician who was wearing the glasses walked by the back of a car, for him to be able to look at the 2 radar sensors on the back of the car and pick up that they had mismatched part numbers. Those are the kind of success stories that then you can take. We found that in a pilot phase. You can take those kind of success stories in your pilot phase and start showing people what the potential is of the technology, which I still think, I told Percy this a couple of times, I still think there's a lot more potential on the remote support side.
I totally agree. I think it's still underutilized for what it can do. I think we all have adopted it pretty well in our private life over the pandemic. We've been on FaceTime a lot, but of course companies don't want the data to be on FaceTime. They want them to be in a safe and secure spot. So I think we will see a lot of more use over the next years as well. And I think you said something that is super important, is if you drive adoption for a new technology like this, it's about getting facts, it's about getting the numbers right, the ROI and stuff like that, doing the tick mark, but it's also about making it human, making it graspable and tangible for people, and really giving it a face. Ideally, you can give it a face. Ideally, you can say, hey, John did that, and he did so much better with that. And everybody knows John. Ideally, you pick somebody that is popular and so on. And this way, you can really drive adoption in a very positive kind of way and encourage people to use it. Let's maybe talk a little bit about the future also. I mean, we've talked about what has already been done, and Jorge, maybe I can hand it over to you and hear from you what kind of your next steps are in terms of.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about it. So when we went into this, we realized that we're at the beginning of the use of the technology. We knew that there's still going to be development. We wanted to be some of the first ones to be able to do that, and like I said, we went to a pilot to see how, when we can use it, we'll be able to do that. But I understood from the beginning that this is just the beginning, right? The technology will continue to evolve and things are going to continue to that. But I wanted to be that because I wanted to start reaping some of this benefit from my program, from my organization, to be able to do that, right? And I think you said it, we already see the value, but we're still scratching the surfaces of how this can be used even more. I can't tell you how much more and where the areas. That depends on you guys, and this is my challenge to you. How can we make it more usable? How can we make it more enjoyable? How can we adapt it to our industries, to our people, to our things, so they can become second nature of using? One of the things that was interesting for me as we started to deploy past the pilot phase is how not everybody wanted to use it, were ready available to use it. I'm not talking about the leadership, I'm talking about the managers or the people who were actually supposed to be using it in their job. But I realized that for them, it's a different way of thinking. Some of them have been doing their job the same way for the last 10, 15, 20 years, and they were used to a pace or a way they do things at a certain time. Now what's disrupting that? And some of them hated it. They didn't want to do it, but it was just comfortable to do it the same way. Now I'm asking them to do something completely different in a different way that completely disrupts their way of thinking, their way of life. So I had to pay attention to that change, and help them bridge that so they can start making part of their use, right? And like I told them from the beginning, he said, this is just a tool. It's not the perfect tool. It's not the greatest tool, but it's a tool. Just like a hammer, a pair of pliers, a screwdriver, it has its use. And when you use it right, it's going to provide a lot of benefits. If you use it wrong, it's not going to work. So I need you to help me to be able to do that. And more and more, I believe my entire team now is already on board. It's been almost a year with it, but it took me a year to get everybody on board. Not everybody jumped to be able to say, I'm going to use it. Even though I already had the stories, I already got the leadership shade, this makes sense and stuff like that, still something that I have to do. Now, in my opinion, as the technology grows, we will going to have to continue to grow with the technology, right? If you look at how, mobile phones were at the beginning of time, so now how we use it, that was a huge change. I expect, we were talking about, James and I were talking about that, that will going to change with time, and we're going to have to adopt it to take the maximum benefit. So that's where we are. What are the next steps? We haven't really cracked. We started to use these tools for training, but we still have not been able to crack it, but we use it all the time for all the training. There is a lot more work to be done to make the experience a lot more seamless for us in our industries. We're 15, 16-year-old people in different countries with different language. So we have a lot of things we have to solve for, but I believe we will get there. Right, that's an area where I think we're able to do that. Then we have to use the issue of, how do we record important parts of it in the whole, conflicts of interest and the whole thing with security and stuff like that. We haven't cracked it yet, but I think as this technology becomes more available and people feel more comfortable, being able to do those things. Some companies, you really don't like us to use it in areas that are important to us. So I think that's going to change with time, but it's not yet. So there is plenty of opportunity. I think there is a green field in front of us, and we're just sitting at the edge. How far we'll go and how fast, I don't know. That's for you guys to tell us. But I am very excited that this is something that provides a lot of benefits to my industry going forward.
Yeah, I agree that we're still just scratching the surface a little bit of where it could be applied. Wesley, have you also some thoughts on which areas you want to expand into next?
Yeah, I think I hit on that a little bit earlier, probably a little premature to this talking point, but yeah, I think the biggest thing for us, again, having work instructions out there. Everything's procedurally driven for us in our facilities, but it's still circle and slash on a piece of paper. How can we reinvent what their work instructions look like that brings in more information so that they know that they're doing it right the first time and the way it needs to be done. So I think that's the biggest thing for us. And it's very complicated to try and go through that, especially in the nuclear industry. But I mean, again, the benefits, we're just scratching the surface on what that could look like and what products it can be deployed on. I mean, we've only looked at a couple devices and a couple different manufacturers as far as software goes. I know there's a lot of great things out there, and it's just the process of getting through it. So I think that is a big hint for us. If we can create that engagement and create a more engaging process for those people that are using the work instructions in the field, that's going to be a huge benefit to us. And then, like I mentioned before, from a training perspective, this, especially with the new generation, we just have such a large gap where most of the nuclear industry started when the original plants were all built back in the 70s and early 80s, and they're still around. But there was a huge gap till about 5 to 10 years ago. So the group that's coming in now, I'm kind of weird. I'm in between. I came into the industry about 15 years ago, but I know the group that's coming in now that they don't want to sit there and flip through a piece of paper. They want that engagement. From a training perspective, they don't want to sit through, a slideshow for 2 hours when they could have some VR experience that engages them right into what they'll eventually see in the field. So that's really where we want to head with it. And it's, especially with VR training, that's a tough cookie to crack. We work a lot with EPRI, and they're helping develop some standard things for the industry. But we need people that are able to deploy those kind of modules that are specific to us and would be a lot different than the rest of the industry. So those training environments can be built quickly, deployed quickly, and be impactful in training, our next gen of workers.
I fully agree with that, yeah. And this is the right place to be, to look for all that software and hardware that you talked about, and take a look at the latest toys that we all love. Maybe to finish it off, James, I think you always about pushing the envelope, right? What do you encourage us to do as users and also as suppliers of this technology?
Yeah, so as Percy mentioned, I came out of our innovation group. I spent the last 7 years within this more grassroots, employee-focused innovation organization within Raytheon. And we were looking a lot at innovations from your sustaining incremental type of innovation up to the disruptive innovation, right? The things that's gonna be the game changer. And I think looking at these technologies over the last several years, we've done a pretty good job at more of the sustaining side of things, recreating a reality, the way that we actually do things, capturing those kind of capabilities and augmenting those, maybe taking what we have today or had yesterday and adding in some additional information or context to it. But what I'm really curious about are what are those next steps? What's it going to look like, not even 5, 10 years from now, but even 20, 30 years from now? What is it going to be like that's completely game-changing and different, disruptive? And what is it going to just change the playing field for all of us? And so I encourage all of you, there's a lot going on right now. We've done a pretty good job recreating reality. I'd really like to see what can we do that's better than reality. And so I encourage all of you to kind of take a chance and think about it and maybe put some things out there for me to gawk at.
I think that's the best finish line really for today is don't recreate reality, make it better. I mean, that's to do. I think that's what our ambition should be. I think we did run out of time. Did we run out of time? Yeah, I guess I'm nodding. So we're going to be outside these doors. If you have additional questions to the panelists or also to myself, I'll be at the TeamViewer booth later. Thanks a lot. Give a big applause to the panel here for all the insights being shared here. And thanks a lot for your time.